So thank you all for joining the first European Universities of the Seas CU Blue Talk session, and welcome. So firstly, a few housekeeping rules. There's a question and answer feature which you are invited to use during the talk to ask the questions. Questions will be answered at the end according to the number of upvotes, so you can upvote questions from others. If some of you are interested in contributing to the discussion as a panelist, please suggest the contribution in the chat and I can connect you with video and audio in the talk. So that's it for the housekeeping rules. And Blue Talks is a series of short expert talks targeted at the broader academic population, but also we would love to see joining us representatives of the industry and other stakeholders interested or active in the topic. We are looking to entice interest in the blue economy and to help you all in understanding what the blue economy really is. We will use this Blue Talks platform to map the future potential of our regions and to explore new joint collaborations. The main connecting medium of the CU Alliance is the sea itself. CU is the glue that binds education, research, business, society, and environment in order to answer the future challenges of the seas. And now I would like to invite the leader of Quintuple Helix work package of the CU project, our Vice Rector, Professor Leandra Vranješ-Markić, to welcome you all in the name of University of Split and CU Alliance, and to introduce us to the overall vision of the CU Alliance.
Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you, as Nicola said, on behalf of the University of Split and the European University of the Seas Alliance, which connects 6 coastal universities: University of Cadiz, University of Western Brittany, University of Kiel, University of Gdańsk, University of Split, and University of Malta, but also our 32 associate partners that include research centers, international clusters of excellence, companies, towns, provincial councils, non-profit associations, and public entities. So our motto is living sustainably from the sea, with the sea, and for the sea. And it shows that as Alliance, we are focused on sea, which unites us. And through this Alliance, we are transforming our universities, and we are working on establishing an integrated long-term strategy for education with strong links to research and to innovation and society in general. We want to create a European inter-university campus of higher education that offers study plans where students and staff can participate in mobilities at all levels, and where our European knowledge creation teams can tackle social challenges together with a multidisciplinary approach. And we really strongly believe that it is crucial to build partnerships and capacity for collaboration among ourselves, and also diverse sectors coming together in Quintuple Helix, which includes university, businesses, public authorities, and civil association. We also believe, and this is very important for this work package, to align our education and research with regional smart specialization to create strategic partnerships for innovation and for sustainable growth. We also have an ambitious goal to create a European Observatory for Sustainable Blue Growth. I believe that these Blue Talks can contribute to achieving these goals by getting to know each other better, by exchanging experiences, and hopefully by initiating new collaborations. I think that today's goal is a very good step in this direction, and I'm very happy to have all of you joining it. And I'm especially thankful for Angela for agreeing to be the first one and to start. And I'm glad also that there are some people who are outside our network, and I hope there will be even more with time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leandra. And now to continue with a small introduction. Basically, we are all citizens of the sea, breathing the salty air and benefiting from the richness of the seas. From coastal tourism, marinas, food from the sea, to shipping, renewable energy, and deep sea activities. The blue bioeconomy is an exciting field of innovation, turning aquatic biomass into novel foods, feed, energy, nutraceuticals, materials, and much more. Such innovations are highly dependent on the interdisciplinary work and strong industrial academic collaboration. Today, I have a great pleasure to welcome Angela Schultz-Zehden as the first expert to start this new initiative of the European University of the Seas. Angela is Managing Director of FESPRO Sustainable Projects and at the same time manager and founder of the non-profit SUBMARINER network. She will share with us today experiences and lessons learned in implementing the blue bioeconomy solutions in the Baltic Sea region. Angela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicola. Yeah, welcome everybody for this lunch talk, where I will present to you the Submariner network and what we have actually done over the course of the past 10 years already, working on actions to promote sustainable and innovative uses of marine resources in the Baltic Sea region. So Submariner is actually an acronym made out of, you know, these key words which are still driving our network, even though we as the submariners are of course also looking into the water to see what kind of benefits we can achieve from them. Now I have this issue, hold on. Good. So as Nicola has already said, I mean, actually Submariner is really about innovative and sustainable uses of marine resources, which is not 100% the same as the blue bioeconomy, but I will come to that later on. But of course, it plays a very important element in our work. Blue bioeconomy, we have to understand, is only one little drop in the overall blue economy. So it's still very much a sector which is difficult to show in economic terms, as has also been evidenced in the now third edition of the Blue Economy report of the European Commission. At the same time, it's also, the blue is also just one piece in the overall big bioeconomy cake, which we also very often experience when we actually promote the blue bioeconomy. So, which is very much where the bioeconomy is very much dominated still by agriculture and forestry, and where it still takes time for actually seeing the sea as also a resource, a sustainable resource to be used by human beings. And here you can see in this graph that really the conversion and commercial use of living aquatic resources is not only entering into, you know, on our plates in the form of fish, but that it has many more sort of products and services to offer, be it fertilizers, be it animal feed, be it high value compounds, medical devices, bioremediation, but also cosmetics. So what are actually the Submariner topics we have chosen more than 7 years ago? You see it here, it stems from macroalgae cultivation, mussel cultivation, the sustainable use of reed and beach karst, blue biotechnology, sustainable fish aquaculture, and I come back to it, what is sustainable fish aquaculture, as well as then actually thinking about combinations, but also sort of thinking about, you know, the marine litter as a resource, as well as, you know, integrating social fields such as marine cultural heritage. And why these are the topics which are evolving over the time, we have various action fields which are necessary. And I will not go into all of them, which you see here, but be it better data, be it about technology, development and transfer, but also training and capacity raising, or working with regulations and licenses. And all this action program, the history of where this comes from is actually a project like yours here, where the idea also already stemmed from 2010. Initiated by the Ministry of Environment in Germany, but also the network of maritime spatial planners around the Baltic Sea region, where the idea was really to look into what kind of future uses are out there for the sea for which we have to plan, which may not be there yet, but which may sort of take space in the years or in the decades to come. And what we did was that we first sort of analyzed, we did the first assessment of these different sustainable and innovative uses of marine resources. We looked into their potentials, we looked into their strengths, the opportunities, but also the barriers and the weaknesses. And out of that, we then developed a roadmap, our action plan, which is still sort of, you know, the Bible of the SUBMARINER network. And then we actually said, okay, we looked at each other and we said, who should implement this roadmap? And we actually felt that despite the fact that there are quite a number of networks, especially in the Baltic Sea region, that there was no network really which could sort of take on board this mission. And out of that sort of derived the idea to really sort of create our own network. And this is what happened then in 2014, where more than stemming from sort of 10 partners representing ministries, research institutes, but also business organizations to join forces and to create the SUBMARINER network really also as an institution, as a non-for-profit European economic interest grouping. And we use our membership fee, and that's what we did, as a leverage to then really go into a strategic set portfolio of projects in order to realize the actions we had set ourselves in the roadmap 2013. This roadmap is currently under revision because on the basis of looking back of what we have achieved over the course of the past 7 years. So out of this is really that the network is sort of now the Baltic Blue Bioeconomy Hub. What do? We of course communicate, we disseminate, we really pull sort of the results of projects together, and we sort of develop out of this also short and sharp position and policy papers, because as you will see later on, a lot has to be done also in view of legislation and regulation. And then we actually sort of really use the members in terms of constantly looking for funding opportunities, continuously doing matchmaking, and sort of, you know, developing the projects we need in order to realize the actions we have set ourselves. And out of this, we have then also developed our accelerator in terms of achieving the critical mass of actors and actually having the actors to assist each other in order to really establish the economy in the blue bioeconomy. And again, this is something I will sort of dwell on later on how we actually accelerate product and service development. So what we do is that we continuously identify the topics, the competences and initiatives of the actors across the Baltic Sea region, as well as increasingly now also across Europe. And then we actually sort of bring them together in a strategic way and sort of, you know, match the actors, the experts, the institutions in a strategic way with each other, in order then to sort of connect them to implement joint initiatives. Not everybody in each activity, but actually the ones we actually need for a specific action, and then sort of disseminate the results of that to the others. So where do we stand today? We do have 32 members, and even today we gained 2 new members. The University of Kiel and the University of Gdansk are among our members, but I would like to stress that this is, again, not only a research institute network, it's really covering regional authorities, national authorities, business support organizations, and increasingly companies themselves. Over the past 7 years, we are now sort of in the stage of the 18th project. So this is actually a bit past tense here, 16 projects overall with more than 25 million euro funds. And what is interestingly to see is that these projects have covered more than 260 project partners, and we have mapped and have access to 1,700 institutions within the Baltic Sea region. And what I think is really important to see that over the course of the past 7 years, we have really seen a vast increase in actual companies and startups. So we have now in our stakeholder database direct access to 900 companies which are really active in the blue bioeconomy. And what is important here is really to reach this critical mass, because as I have shown in my previous slides, we should recognize that the bioeconomy in the ocean, using ocean resources, is still a little drop only. So it's important that we connect the actors together which are active in this innovative field. So what have these projects been concretely? I will not go into all details, but as you had seen in our strategic action plan, we were talking about mussel cultivation, about macroalgae cultivation, about sustainable fish aquaculture, but also smart specializations and multi-use. And here you see sort of, our move from our first generation projects towards the second generation projects, and out of this always connecting the results, developing the next generation projects. And if you have a look at the upper right corner, what you see here now is the new field we are increasingly working on, is that moving from projects to working groups and actually sort of really establishing the Blue Bio Company and Innovation Cluster. So let's have a more specific look into some of the initiatives and topics we have covered and where we are. So Baltic Blue Grove was a project which is now already finalized on mussel cultivation. You have to understand that in the Baltic, our little dirty Baltic is actually the most polluted sea in Europe. It's highly eutrophied. So the ambition of mussel cultivation in the Baltic is not about sort of producing mussels for human food, but actually to promote them as a nutrient uptake measure. Because so far what we have seen is that nutrient reduction is dealt, rightly so, at point places. So it's very much more about land-based measures. Various mussel cultivation is the first measure possible to take out the nutrients from the water which are already there, so to deal with the nutrient load already. At the same time, it's a low trophic aquaculture which actually holds a lot of promise for sort of being a good feed product, and therefore also closing the nutrient cycle as well as the protein cycle. And what we did in this project was really sort of to promote mussel cultivation in 6 farms. What were the results? Actually, what we have been able to show with these 6 farms, is that even in the Baltic proper, which is low salinity level, even though that the mussels which are growing there are much smaller and growing slower, that actually the nitrogen uptake and the phosphorus uptake of these mussel farms is almost at the same level as we see in other areas in the West Baltic, which higher salinity levels, where, however, we really need the mussel farms in the Baltic proper, because that's where the eutrophication is taking place. And this was made possible because actually the technology had been adapted to the low salinity Baltic proper geographic conditions. And it has really been shown that this is a measure which is possible. After this project, we have actually produced, or we have established, the permanent transnational working group in order to really transfer the knowledge from across various projects taking place on mussel cultivation. And this is what we have seen as super important, and this is our mission as Submariner, to sort of get out of this box of different projects and actually sort of really lead in terms of this knowledge transfer across projects. This takes time, but it's important so that actually those who are now dealing with mussel farming in the Baltic will actually be able to build on the results of previous projects. So from these different types of projects and continuing the data exchange from the various mussel farms, we have developed policy papers and recommendations. And what we see as very important is, so to complement land-based measures with appropriate marine actions, to accept mussel farming as a nutrient mitigation measure, and actually to really invest now in more and larger farms. And what we also see as very important is, again, this kind of creation of a critical mass so that we foster cooperative schemes among the different mussel farms in order to reach the critical mass of mussels and biomass necessary in order to create the feed market. Because what they need is actually sort of a continuous high quality stream of biomass from mussels in order to create the feed. And we are very happy to announce that actually this call for accepting mussel farming as a nutrient mitigation measure has been recently approved in the Our Baltic conference, which was called by the EU Commissioner, and it has been now really a ministerial decision. So you can see that these kind of networks and policy and long-term lobbying really in the end may have a result. So let's move forward from mussels to algae. We have picked up on the results of the mussel cultivation and actually to look also into algae cultivation in the Baltic Sea, given the fact that algae also holds the potential of having carbon and nutrient uptake effects, but actually also being really a good protein source and, let's say, the novel food from the sea. What we are here working on is that, again, we are building on sort of the maps we have created for mussels in order to illustrate suitable sites, and actually also a tool for assessing the nutrient uptake, and especially also to inform the authorities in order to raise their capacities in order to allow algae cultivation in the Baltic Sea, given the fact that algae is such a new form that it's very often not present and it's not known for the licensing bodies. Then let's move on in terms of the more traditional aquaculture, fish aquaculture. Here we had a project on cross-border development for really promoting innovative and sustainable aquaculture technologies. Again, this may be something quite specific to the Baltic Sea region, but given the fact that it's highly eutrophied, it's almost not possible to continue with open ponds in the Baltic Sea region. So it's important to look into other ways of sustainable aquaculture, and here especially to recirculating aquaculture systems, closed systems, and in order to drive their efficiency and get cost at a lower state, it's important to, again, have innovative combinations here. So to work, for instance, with geothermal energy, or to actually have high value shrimp production in Poland. Going into the field of combinations, we have then also sort of really looked very concretely of what is actually multi-use in European seas. And what makes sense in terms of multi-use and where are the benefits and how can we promote them. And here you see sort of a big picture of what kind of multi-uses we can see and what may be sort of possible. First of all, what is multi-use? Multi-use is actually defined as sort of the conscious placement of different uses in the same space or making use of the same resources. Of course, many of you will say, we have sort of multi-use, of course we have multi-use of space all the time, but the difference is that it's a conscious coexistence and that it's really about sort of using the positive synergies between different uses. And why so? Because, sorry, I go back to this one. Why so? What are the benefits? Is that, first of all, thinking again about the future and looking at this big picture of a rather busy ocean, it's important to keep as much space unplanned for future uses and unused. So the idea is to have an efficient use. So basically, what we know from land, to have industrial places that actually where there is an offshore wind farm, an offshore installation, so where the ocean is already used for a certain sector, that this is then also co-used by other marine users. So for instance, to have it as a place for offshore aquaculture, but also other types of combinations, which are basically sort of increasing the acceptance of marine uses. And here you may see here in the back, sort of the sparkling offshore wind parks, which are then actually could also be used, that they are not sort of, being a visual pollution, as it's often said, but actually a visual attraction, a tourism attraction. And what is important here is that it's much easier. That was sort of one of the key findings of that project. It's much easier to sort of have this joint multi-use development as a very, very early stage, rather than sort of installing a secondary use into an already existing offshore wind park. So it's something which you have to take into account already today for instance, an offshore wind park, which may only be established in 10 years' time. So for those who are here now attending this webinar from countries where you say, well, we do not have offshore wind parks, Angela, what are you talking about? This is actually of particular relevance because it's something you should take into account today to think about how can we combine uses in the planning, and even then further, how can we take into account when the life of these installations is over, and therefore we are also dealing with decommissioning or decommissioned platforms of oil and gas, and how can we make them used in the future rather than taking them out of the water. And again, in terms of our idea of the submariner network and continuously sort of driving actions forward, various MUSES was looking into an assessment and developing an action plan of what kind of multi-uses are possible. The United project where we are involved in is now really to drive it further and to actually sort of make it realize, so to create demonstrators on these concrete multi-uses. We have to be aware that in some cases, this multi-use is also then actually meaning that we have to develop the single use. So for instance, that very often aquaculture is simply still not possible yet in offshore situations. So it's the development of the single use, but at the same time immediately taking into account on how can this be combined with other uses out there. So I see time is running, so I move on very quickly in terms of our accelerator for blue growth. This is about actually improving the science business knowledge transfer and our ambition in terms of really accelerating concrete product and service development, so to assist startups in actually really, developing the blue bioeconomy. We have run this accelerator for the past 7 years, and we are very proud that we actually had 33 real cases. We have now 60 mentors, and what we see is also very important is that these startups are not sort of, coming to such kind of accelerator just like that. You need sort of blue detectives, and we have them out there in all Baltic countries to actually draw attention to the blue potential and sort of bringing them into this networking. We have 2 to 3 matchmaking events and pitching events, and we then always associate one of the startups with at least 2 or 3 mentors. And I always sort of compare it to, a range of doctors looking at one human being, that what is specific here and what we have seen is that very often one mentor alone cannot assist a startup. You need to have this combined view, and I think this is also the ambition of C4U, is that you really need sort of this competence from different perspectives, from different sectors, in order to drive the startup forward. And here we have sort of the Mentors Forum, where basically that's an essential tool that every month our mentors meet each other and sort of discuss these different cases and think about what they are actually, what kind of needs they have. And just here very quickly, that this, here you see sort of a spread of what kind of blue bio-based products have really been sort of resulting from this work of the accelerator, and that many of them may not have, however, the product already out, but that all of them have reached the next technology readiness level. But what is specific also about this accelerator, in contrast to other accelerators, which are sort of running for 6 weeks or so, is that we take these cases on board as long as we see that there's a development going then also to the next level. So we leave them in as long as they want and as long as we see that there is still a development necessary. And very often our cases are then actually also moving into becoming a mentor themselves to colleagues, to other startups, because that is the whole idea, that we need to create this family to create this critical mass of actors. And here you see sort of, where, from which market segments and which kind of marine resource they are using. And of course, in times of SDGs, that actually we also put a lot of emphasis on that. It's not only about innovative uses, but that actually these startups are also promoting sustainable uses. Okay, and last but not least, the Blue Platform. Visit our network, our website, because this is really the true info portal on the Baltic Blue Bioeconomy, where, as I can only say, we are continuously sort of tracking what are the concrete results, what are the concrete studies or knowledge which are worthwhile to be transferred to other actors which have not been participating in a given set of projects. And last but not least, because you come from education, I would also like to promote that we are active. We are the Baltic focal point in ocean literacy. Again, an action which, when we sort of created the Submariner network, which was not called ocean literacy at that time, we called it awareness raising. But now we are very happy and proud that the European Commission has taken this initiative on board, and that they are, we are part of a consortium which is sort of really forming the European-wide coalition of actors who are active in ocean literacy or want to become active in ocean literacy, with the angle of specific focus on youth, as well as specific focus on schools, and actually sort of the topical themes on healthy food, healthy ocean, food from ocean, and climate for ocean. And even though this is a European-wide network, actually our action being mainly to sort of pull, first of all, the actors together across the Baltic Sea region, because what we can see again here is that we have actors, enthusiasts being active in the different countries, but that there is no coherent framework yet, no coherent network in order to combine these different actors. And having said all this, I would like to stress this is not a network which is a computer network, or it doesn't work like that. You have to have a personal network full of trust and fun. And this was taking a photo before COVID, but in fact, we have been able to continue this network and to sustain this network also in COVID times, and very often meeting up, and perhaps sometimes even meeting up in an easier way through sort of conferences like yours, which you're organizing here, through Zoom or through other tools. But we hope that there will be a time again that we can also shake hands personally again, because that is sort of, what is making the glue, that we actually sort of do not have to look so much, for instance, into intellectual property rights, because it's a network of trust. Last but not least, despite these 7 years, there's still a lot which needs to be done, and we are continuously driving this forward. Here you see sort of the wide picture, the big picture of the implementation strategy, a big stakeholder process we undertook 2 years ago, but which we are continuously striving forward. And, so therefore, in terms of our new roadmap, our updated roadmap, what are sort of, our next level of tasks? Let's highlight here a few. Consumer uptake of blue food, but actually the right blue food, what kind of blue food is really of high nutritional value, as well as being climate neutral. Education and multi-skill groups. So working with hackathons, working with ideation, bringing in digitalization, bringing in the developments which are out there on IT and sensors, etc. But then also looking into feed, overcoming regulatory barriers, thinking of completely new ways of funding the blue bioeconomy, such as, for instance, also a water improvement fund in order to actually finance marine litter issues. And then actually finally also establishing the company corner, as well as thinking about ecosystem restoration. This is just a small selection from the actions we foresee, but where again, we are sort of taking a strategic way of combining this project portfolio. And having said all that, I hope I have kept in my time frame a little bit, so to allow you now to have, a good discussion and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I'm fascinated by the multi-layered approach and all the initiatives that you have under this network. So we have just basically one question, and it's related to blue bio startups that are going through Accelerator. And the question is, how are the work standards monitored over time? Are authorities involved in this monitoring? Not sure what Ritien is meaning by this. So if you want to connect in the call as a panelist? That would be just to.
But I can react to that, is
okay.
that we do not, I mean, in the criteria of assessing on whether we take on board a startup, yes or no, as I said, we do not simply take startups because they are so innovative, but we actually sort of really have a very close assessment and often also a discussion on what they actually suggest is sustainable. And sustainability is, of course, a multi-layer criterion, which is not only looking into the environment, but is also looking into social standards. So we would, and you know, the focus is also more or less still on startups which are working on production in Europe. We don't really see us as competent into looking, for instance, on startups which are dealing with aquaculture in Asian countries. I had recently been requested by the European White Blue Invest to sort of coach such kind of startup, but I have declined that because I don't think that none of us in our network would sort of feel fit to sort of assess on what is out there. If I have answered this question, yeah, I hope.
Yeah, and there's one more question from Alan Antia. How and where do you involve non-marine actors, public, other industries, policymakers, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting question. Actually, quite a number of our initiatives, and that's also what the network, I mean, our work here at the Secretariat is standing for, is to continuously promote the blue-green dimension. So, and to get out of the blue box, in a sense. On one hand, it's very useful for us that, I mean, that we can, you know, actually sort of jump onto the blue growth agenda from DG Mare. But, and so that on one hand, focus was given to the blue specifically, but in the end, you know, we all live on land, and policymakers are on land and the consumers are on land. So it is very important to work not only with specialists who have sort of, you know, by education or by being sort of placed at the ocean, who feel affiliated with the ocean, but actually sort of to raise awareness among those who do not have the blue on the agenda. You cannot see it here, but I'm sort of giving this webinar from the nice blue city of Berlin. And why so? Because here are actually the policymakers. So it's, and being from the country Germany, even though I'm not focusing on Germany, where, you know, the blue is not playing such a high role apart from the north, but it's still here important. We have done an analysis to show, for instance, that the blue economy is actually extremely prominent also in the south of Germany, not only because the energy produced by the offshore wind parks has to go to the south where the industry is, but where actually also the companies are, which are providing the new propulsions for shipping, but also for offshore wind. So it's not only coastal, it's actually really very much about countries overall. And perhaps on the last point, we also run projects on marine litter, which are, for instance, also with organizations in Hungary. So I think that it's important that we see, you know, the blue-green connection all the time.
Thanks. We have one more question from Lisa Patch. Which aspects of the Submariner network do you think could be replicable, so to speak, in other regions? And to what extent is the success of the network region specific, apart from the specific scientific topics that tackle problems in that specific region?
Yeah, very good question. I think that what is possible to replicate, and I can only promote that, is, for instance, in the Adriatic Ionian region, to establish a similar kind of multi-layer, multi-country, transnational network, perhaps even also based on such kind of European economic interest grouping. With then also the importance that that it's a bottom-up initiative with enthusiasm from the members themselves to set themselves this strategic agenda, and actually also understanding what they are responsible for and what they are not responsible for. What we see important is to have a coordination, a centralized, it doesn't need to be centralized, but I mean, to have a secretariat and sort of an executive body which is sort of driving this through. It needs persistence. It has to be, you know, on a long-term basis, because this is the key point that, and the difference, that you work across projects. You have to work with projects, but you have to sort of keep this strategic overview in terms of a project portfolio, and to foster the continuous knowledge exchange. That's the first level. The second level is what I think is definitely replicable, and that's why I have also promoted it, so is the Accelerator, in terms of really having a good process on how to sort of integrate the science knowledge and to transfer the science knowledge into sort of concrete businesses. This is not for everybody, not every scientist has to be involved, but to have this ambition, this mechanism to realize this. So to have this, you know, not only to talk about multi-sector and triple or quadruple helix structures, but actually to make this also work.
And what would be the typical companies or projects that are joining Accelerator? At which level they are? So could you tell me a little bit about it?
Hold on, I just click through, because here, oops, here you see, sorry, yeah. So basically, in terms of this, in order to make life easier, we say always it's an accelerator for startups. This is not really true. We do have also a lot of companies asking for support by the accelerator, which are existing and which actually have, however, a new idea, a new product or a new service idea. So it's a startup of, you know, new business opportunities. As you can see here, quite a number, nevertheless, come from R&D. That's partially also because the blue detectives are often also working with universities. But we also see it from the other side coming, so that it's basically an infrastructure or a company which has something on to offer, who are then, for instance, this geothermal energy company, or we have also an algae cultivation plant, or a monitoring technology plant, or somebody who was working on mobile dryers, who are more or less looking for those who are making use of these infrastructures and these technologies. So who are more looking for then the, you know, the startups or the blue bio companies which are picking this up. So that's then from a different side. Yes, but basically, you know, the classical one is coming from a technology readiness level 5 to 7. We are happy that we have, over the course of the 3 years from the 33, you cannot really say, but I mean, that we have, what did we say here? That we had 3 cases which have reached their dream and launched a new product. That's again old, because in fact by now we have 6 to 7 products which are really on the market.
Great, fantastic. We have 2 more interesting questions and then we can wrap up. So Tony Apolaro asks, what is the relation with other actors exploiting sea resources who do not fit in this comprehensive eco-sustainable approach? For example, petrol companies or intensive fishing activities and such.
Can you, perhaps, you know, the one who has asked this question, can you, because I cannot see it here in the chat. So whether we are, how we deal with blue activities which are not sustainable?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Interesting question. I mean, we are off, let's say, for instance, with fishery. Let's put it this way. I think that, you know, SUBMARINER, what we stand for is that we want to give a positive picture. So for instance, also in ocean literacy, we, for instance, run a project in Sweden, which is called Ocean Blues, where we are working with schools and bring them together with scientists in order to sort of show that it is possible to really have, you know, make use of new knowledge and new technology in order to sustain the ecosystem services we all sort of depend on. So basically, for instance, in the marine litter projects, it's not us, I mean, not the secretariat, but in fact then the members in our project. So here we are working with the WWF, who are more on the ground and who are working with fishermen in order to give them incentives to collect these, for instance, these ghost nets. And where we are then on our side, then actually doing the policy lobbying in order to ensure that the incentives are actually really provided for, given the fact that, for instance, in the Baltic Sea region, fishermen, if they bring ghost nets on shore, they currently, the irony is that they would actually have to pay for the disposal of these ghost nets. So there is not really a positive incentive. And this is what we are then working for. Yeah, and then we are working also in terms of other fishery issues. You know, in the Baltic, for instance, it was very public now that there is the cod ban. So to actually, again, provide new income, new ways of sustaining the income of fishery, either by pesca tourism, so to expand their portfolio to also include tourism into their portfolio, to have really aquaculture, to have new product uses, these type of things.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions, and I think if it's all right by you, we started 5 minutes late. We were 5 minutes late, so if it's okay to squeeze in 2 more questions. So we have a question from Christian. If you talk to politicians and if you give recommendations, is it possible to speak with one voice? I assume that not all members of the network have the same opinion in all topics.
Well, that's why, well, actually, no, we do speak with one voice. That was in the case, for instance, of the mussel cultivation policy paper. That was a process, a long process, in order to bring the results, to condense the results into one paper, which is then sort of really accepted by all. We have had cases, just to again dwell on this example, where especially the ministries or the authorities were sometimes a bit more hesitant in terms of working with nature, etc. But where it was indeed a big process to sort of find the ways, the formulation, and the joint position, which is then reflecting that. But we, of course, in exceptional cases, what we do is that we have these policy papers offered by a number of members, and basically explicitly say that this is then sort of the joint opinion of this group, and that it's not reflecting the opinions of the whole Submariner network. This is also what we sometimes do, but only in very contentious fields.
I have one more question from my side, and then I can let Leandra, as I know that she has one question, and then I promise we're done. So, did you have any projects or work on digital innovation and transformation in the blue economy? For example, there is currently undergoing European Digital Innovation Hubs initiative. So, did you consider something like that?
Not with the involvement of the Secretariat, but some of our members are active in this field. So for, in the blue cloud, etc., and are participating in these European-wide initiatives. And of course, we do have members who are particularly working on data. But as I said, otherwise I would not have it here on my agenda for the future, that we for sure want to intensify working with digitalization, especially also in view of, because we worked a lot on it, in not only in view of monitoring and the classical environmental monitoring, but also to having more efficient approaches in making good use of new technology and what type of information we actually require. And then last but not least, also to increase transparency of the value chains for the consumers. But not everything, of course, I show you more the positive picture, but for instance, working with more efficient and effective monitoring based on the new opportunities provided by digitalization. We had this on our agenda since 2017, and so far, admittedly, we have not been successful in actually securing the project resources in order to work on this more intensively. But we have HELCOM and we have members, etc. So, I mean, individuals are working on this in a strategic way, but we would like to have it more on our agenda.
Okay, perfect. That's maybe one of the opportunities for our collaboration. But I would now like to give the honor to Leandra to have the last question, and then we will finish today's talk.
Thank you, Angela, for this nice talk and discussion and answers. So you were mentioning EU for Ocean Coalition, and you mentioned that it's directed towards the Baltic Sea mostly. Do you know, are there plans to extend it, and are you involved in this? And also, in general, do you facilitate somehow lifelong learning?
Yeah, so the EU for Ocean Coalition, this is actually a European-wide initiative, and it's open for everybody. Please look it up at also the Maritime Forum or Google it. And in fact, that's actually quite, I mean, it's a mixture. It's a top-down from the European Commission. It's directly funded by them, but then also bottom-up, because the coalition is, I mean, I won't say only, but I mean, it is the initiative of bringing actors together. It will run for the next, still the next 2 years, but it's not providing funding for then actually doing the activities on the ground. So here, the platform is sort of supporting you know, that actors are coming together in order to then, you know, have joint applications under Erasmus Plus or anything else. For the Mediterranean, please look it up, or I put it into the chat, or, you know, into your, I send it to you later on, who is actually in charge of the Mediterranean. Here you put me on the blind spot, because a colleague of mine is working on this, especially also from our side in the Baltic Sea region. But no, they are very active also in the Med.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. It was an excellent 1 hour, and thank you for breaking the ice. So it wasn't easy, and please excuse me for all the small hiccups. Thank you all for your active participation today. Please follow the social media accounts of the CU Alliance and the website cu-eu.com for the announcements of the upcoming sessions. For the next Blue Talk session, which is planned for 12th of November, we will have Margherita Capelletto from the Blue Med Initiative to share the experience of the Blue Mediterranean implementation plan. And when you exit the meeting, there will be just 3 short questions, and I kindly ask you to give us your feedback so that we can improve and create more useful content in future. Thank you all, and thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.